Mariah Carey says she has a finished Michael Jackson duet. Not a rumor, not a demo, finished, mixed, ready to go, and it has never been released. Here's the part that doesn't make sense. Carey didn't say the song was stuck in a legal dispute, or buried in a rights negotiation, or missing from a hard drive somewhere. She said the estate told her directly they were planning something really huge for Michael's legacy, and her song would, in her own words, usurp that plan. That's not a scheduling conflict. That's a media strategy. One of the biggest selling artists alive wants the song out, fans are demanding it. The recording is finished, and someone somewhere inside the machine that runs Michael Jackson's afterlife has enough power to keep saying no. Who is that person, and why do they have more control over Michael Jackson's music right now than at any point in the last 15 years? By the end of this video, you'll understand why this was never really about one song. For years, fans were told the estate existed to protect Michael's work, and in many ways that seemed true. Albums came out, reissues arrived, the catalog grew. But the estate was never just a preservation society. It was a business, one that made nine-figure decisions, including the 2016 sale of half of Michael's Sony/ATV stake for around $750 million. Decisions that remain controversial precisely because Michael is no longer alive to approve, reject, or challenge them. So when Mariah Carey said a finished duet was being held back, the question wasn't just why, it was who had the power to stop it. And behind that decision is an estate whose power structure has recently changed in ways most people haven't noticed. Here's what actually happened. In late 2025, while promoting her 16th studio album, Here for It All, Carey sat down for a public interview and revealed something she'd apparently been holding back for a long time, a duet with Michael Jackson. Her exact words, "The song isn't in the vault, it's right there. Not buried, not unfinished. Complete, mixed, with new vocals she layered over one of Michael's original tracks." Some context matters here. Here for It All wasn't a throwaway project. Carey has described it as shaped by grief after losing both her mother and her sister within 24 hours of each other. In 2024, every song on it reportedly carried real emotional weight, which makes it even more striking that a completed Michael Jackson collaboration, something most artists would consider a career-defining moment, didn't make the cut. Not because it was creatively wrong for the album, but because someone outside her project had final say over whether it could exist publicly at all. She described playing the track privately for people and watching their reaction. Surprise, then disbelief, then the same word every time. Classic. And then she did something unusual. She encouraged fans to campaign publicly for the song's release, as if she herself didn't have the authority to release it, despite being one half of the actual recording. A petition circulated within days. Entertainment blogs amplified it. Clips of Carey's interview spread across social platforms within hours, almost universally framed as a charming mystery rather than a signal worth scrutinizing. A global superstar, asking the public to pressure an estate on her behalf over a song she helped make. That detail alone tells you everything about where the real power sits in this story. There's also an unresolved question about where this recording actually came from. Speculation has circulated for years about a possible Carey-Jackson collaboration, dating back to the 1999 Michael Jackson and Friends benefit concerts, where Carey performed alongside him. Some longtime observers believe what she's describing now could trace back to material from that era, rebuilt and reworked into something new. Neither Carey nor the estate has clarified the song's actual origin, which leaves an open gap in a story that otherwise sounds fully documented. Most coverage treated this like a feel-good mystery. Two icons, one hidden song, fans waiting for a release, but almost nobody asked the colder question. If the song was finished, if Carey wanted it out, and if fans were publicly demanding it, who had enough power to keep saying no? The timeline points toward one obvious answer. The Michael Jackson biopic. Simply titled Michael, directed by Antoine Fuqua, and starring Michael's nephew Jafar Jackson. The film has been delayed 3 times, from April 2025 to October 2025 to April 2026. 3 delays on a single film is unusual even by Hollywood standards, and each one has raised the same question: what exactly is this film going to say about Michael Jackson's life, and who gets to decide? This is not just another music biopic. It is an estate-backed legacy project carrying enormous financial and reputational weight. The film has faced persistent questions about whether a production co-developed with the estate's involvement can honestly address the allegations and controversies that defined Michael's later years. Those questions haven't gone away with each delay. If anything, the longer the film takes to arrive, the more the surrounding conversation has shifted from excitement to scrutiny. Against that backdrop, a surprise Mariah Carey duet would not be small news. It could become the headline, pulling the entire media conversation in a direction the estate didn't script, at a moment when they need every news cycle pointed toward the film. In other words, the song may not be unreleased because nobody wants it. It may be unreleased because it arrived at exactly the wrong moment for people managing something much larger. Posthumous Michael Jackson releases have never been random. The 2010 album Michael and the 2014 album Escape were both timed deliberately, aligned with anniversaries and moments when public attention was already peaking. Everything has been sequenced. Today, the estate can track exactly when interest in Michael's catalog spikes after trailers, anniversaries, documentaries, or viral moments. That makes timing more valuable than ever. A surprise headline about a previously unheard Michael Jackson duet with one of the best-selling female artists in history would generate the kind of attention that takes months of marketing to produce, but it would generate it at the wrong time for the wrong project. From a pure business standpoint, that's not a delay, that's risk management around a calendar the estate controls entirely. But here's the detail almost nobody connects to this story, and it changes the picture entirely. This isn't the first time posthumous Michael Jackson recordings created controversy. After the 2010 album Michael, several tracks including Breaking News, Monster, and Keep Your Head Up were challenged by fans and members of Jackson's own family, who questioned whether the lead vocals were actually Michael's. That controversy forced the estate into an unusual position, publicly defending the authenticity of vocals using audio engineers and forensic analysis, essentially proving in the court of public opinion, something that should never have been in question at all. Sony ultimately faced a lawsuit over the album. The case settled out of court, but it left a lasting mark on how the estate now approaches anything new tied to Michael's voice. A new Carey duet, however celebrated privately, represents exactly the category of unverified, publicly hyped material that once triggered that kind of headache. Releasing it without total control of the surrounding story is a risk the estate has learned the hard way to avoid, and that lesson has had a visible effect on how the estate operates. Since that controversy, the estate appears to have become far more cautious with anything involving previously unheard vocal recordings. Projects have been packaged more carefully, announced with more documentary support, and framed with more verified context around Michael's involvement. The Escape era taught them that fan excitement alone isn't enough protection. The internet will forensically analyze anything attached to Michael Jackson's voice, and the estate now builds its releases to survive that scrutiny before they're made public, not after. Now overlay that lesson onto who is actually running things today. For over a decade, the estate operated under two co-executors, John Branca and John McClane. Two decision-makers, one shared authority, a built-in check on any single point of view dominating. Every posthumous release, every licensing deal, every major decision about Michael's image theoretically required both of them. Then McClane passed away. That single event quietly reshaped the entire power structure. Branca became the sole surviving original executor, now operating alongside newer appointees, but functionally more central to every major decision than at any point since Michael Jackson died. Branca's history with Michael was never uncomplicated. He had been removed from Michael's inner circle before, later returned, and was again outside Michael's closest orbit during some of the most turbulent years of his life. After Michael's death in 2009, Branca re-emerged as executor under the will, a development that some people around Michael's family publicly questioned at the time. Whether those questions were well-founded is a matter of public record and ongoing debate. What isn't disputed is that Branca has been at the center of the estate's decision-making from the very beginning, through every major posthumous release, every business deal, and every controversy the estate has navigated since. The dual executor system with McClane wasn't a formality. It was a structural balance between two people with different histories and different instincts. If one pushed too aggressively in any direction, the other had room to push back. Every licensing deal, every posthumous release, every major decision about Michael's image theoretically required both of them. That system also meant there were at least two vantage points on any major decision, two sets of relationships, two assessments of risk, two people who might weigh what's right for the legacy differently on any given question. That balance is effectively gone. What remains is a smaller circle of decision-makers, with Branca now at the center of nearly all of it. And this wasn't just about one song. The estate had already demonstrated it could make enormous unilateral decisions over Michael's catalog, including that 2016 Sony ATV deal, which permanently reduced the Jackson family's stake in some of the most valuable song rights ever assembled. Whether you see that as smart management or a significant loss depends on where you're standing. but it demonstrated something clearly. The people running this estate are not passive caretakers. They are active architects of how Michael Jackson's name and music function in the marketplace. So here's the real question buried underneath a story about one song. If Branca has more unilateral control over Michael Jackson's estate than he's had in over 15 years, and a finished, publicly celebrated song is still sitting untouched, whose interests are actually being protected? Michael Jackson never consented to this specific decision. He can't. Every choice made about his unreleased music is now an interpretation of what he probably would have wanted, made by people whose financial success depends on those interpretations being profitable. That's not unique to this estate. It's the reality every posthumous estate faces. But it does mean the line between protecting his legacy and protecting the estate's revenue has become almost impossible to draw cleanly from the outside. Every unreleased recording that stays locked away is not just a commercial asset being managed. It is a missing piece of creative history. Session musicians, engineers, and former collaborators have periodically referenced recordings that have never surfaced publicly, finished tracks, collaborations that never made it past private playback. Mariah Carey's Duet is only visible because she chose to talk about it on camera. The rest of the vault remains invisible, controlled, sequenced, and released only when the estate decides the moment is right. Which means the version of Michael Jackson the public gets to know is not necessarily the most complete one, it's the most convenient one. Michael's estate is not alone in facing this problem. Prince and Whitney Houston's estates faced similar criticism over how posthumous material was handled. But Michael's case is different. The scale, the legal scrutiny, and the ongoing controversies around his catalog are almost unmatched in modern music history. That combination may be exactly why caution has become the estate's default setting for nearly everything connected to his name, including a duet from a longtime collaborator who has been nothing but cooperative. The stakes of getting it wrong, in terms of legal exposure, public narrative, and reputational damage to the biopic's rollout, are genuinely high. But so is the cost of a system where legitimate creative work can be withheld indefinitely, with no public accountability, no timeline, and no recourse for the artist involved. Corey herself never framed this as an accusation. Her tone stayed measured, even sympathetic. She said she understood the estate had bigger plans, but that calm acknowledgement reveals something important. Decisions about Michael Jackson's musical output are no longer shared between competing voices. They're increasingly centralized, and the person sitting closest to the center of that circle right now has more authority than at any point in the last 15 years. There's one more detail worth noting before this closes. Carey didn't leak the song herself, didn't upload a snippet, didn't defy the estate despite expressing genuine frustration on national television. She stayed within the boundaries set for her, even while publicly disagreeing with them. She asked fans to campaign. She described the song as something she believed in, and then she waited. That restraint reflects something real about how much leverage even one of the most successful artists in music history is willing to use against an estate she still has to work within, whether through future projects, licensing requests, or simply maintaining a professional relationship with people who control access to one of the most valuable catalogs on the planet. Her frustration was visible, her compliance was total. That's the quiet dynamic sitting underneath all of this. Not a legal battle, not a bitter public feud, just a finished song. A famous artist asking fans to speak up because she couldn't, and an estate with enough institutional weight to make that the only option available to her. And that dynamic will likely repeat with other collaborators, other unreleased recordings, other decisions made inside a structure with no public-facing accountability. Because the infrastructure that allowed the estate to say no to Mariah Carey over a finished song she co-created will still be in place long after the biopic premieres, long after the current marketing cycle ends, long after the specific reasons for this particular delay stop mattering. The power to decide what gets heard, and when, doesn't expire. It just finds the next reason to hold on a little longer. The biopic will come and go, the marketing cycle will end. And when it does, we may finally learn whether Mariah Carey's Duet was truly being protected or simply held until it became useful. What won't change is the underlying question this story exposed. When a deceased artist's work is this valuable, this scrutinized, and this commercially embedded in ongoing projects, the concept of release becomes less about artistic legacy and more about strategic deployment. Michael Jackson's music may not be sitting in a vault simply because the estate is waiting sentimentally for the right moment. At this scale, music is also leverage, part of a larger system of sequenced releases, controlled narratives, and timed announcements. And leverage, inside a multi-billion-dollar operation, is rarely surrendered ahead of schedule, not for fans, not for petitions. And as it turns out, Not even for Mariah Carey, because this was never just about one unreleased song. A song exists, a calendar is being managed, and the people deciding when the world hears Michael Jackson again are not the people who wrote, sang, or lived the music. The simplest version of this story was never the whole story.